Welcome back to hour two of Nothing Personal on this Thursday, August 21st. And you know what Thursday means? It means we have a guest. And today is not just any ordinary Thursday. Twice a week, I know you're listening to the Mina Show. And if you're not, you ought to be. We're talking about also ESPN's NFL analyst extraordinaire. And she's ours for a couple minutes. Mina, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I do wonder how many listeners you have that listen to my show, how much crossover there is. I'm not sure. Perhaps football fans?
Well, the hope is that there's very little crossover until right now, and all of a sudden there will be great amounts of crossover, thereby making this mutually beneficial.
Let's go. I hope so. That's why I'm
So,
here.
we have to talk football. Football season starting. I do want to talk baseball because I have a secret thought about you that baseball is a true love of yours.
It's not, I don't feel like it doesn't need to be secret. It's kind of my most uncomplicated fandom at this point, and it's my oldest fandom. I think that's pretty common with kids, that baseball is their first love. It's kind of easier for kids to understand. But I grew up a Mariners fan from a really, really young age. First sports events I ever went to were Mariners games at the Kingdom. And to this day, at times, unfortunately, sometimes fortunately, I remain a Mariners fan.
Well, what's been unfortunate? I mean, they haven't won a
This
World Series,
this
but
latest
you've
East Coast
had.
stand, they've been losing like crazy. They just got killed by the Phillies. That's what's unfortunate. And also, by the way, 20 years of just devastation.
Well, you had the best record in the history of baseball is a Mariners record. It had some playoff issues with the Yankees, but you've had such stars come through there that are such a part of the lore of the Mariners that I don't think you've gotten cheated. I mean, being a Marlins fan would be better because you'd have two rings, but it's not too shabby to love the Mariners.
I do agree, and I would say also those stars are like truly lovable players that the Mariners have had. Some of the really like good guys you're excited to root for. Obviously, Ken Griffey Jr., but Edgar Martinez, who's my personal favorite of all time. Felix Hernandez during some of those fetal years, and now you have Cal Raleigh and Julio Rodriguez. They're very likable stars in Seattle.
I assume you don't have an MVP vote in the American League.
I do not have an MVP vote in baseball.
If you
No.
were to have it, are you going? I mean, can you try to separate business from personal? Does Cal Raleigh have the advantage over Aaron Judge in your mind?
Last time I looked at it, I thought he had a pretty strong case over Judge, but that was a few weeks ago. So I haven't, I will be totally upfront. I have not looked at the numbers lately to really break it, but it was obviously very tight then, and I suspect it's very tight now.
My point always was that being a catcher is way harder than being a
Yeah.
designated hitter or even a right fielder because you're the only player who's facing the field. You're involved in every single play, no matter what. I mean, a pickoff play to first, you're still involved because you're giving the sign. So what he's doing, both
Yeah.
catching and also just hitting home runs in a way that he hasn't hit before, it's been an impressive season for them.
And he's a good catcher. He's not just a catcher, right? Like he's good at it. So yeah, that's obviously reflected in some of the advanced stats, the defensive contributions, but I do think you have to consider that for sure.
So we do the stats here with our audience because people get all crazy when teams lose a couple in a row. Their baseball teams, like when the Mariners lost a couple to the Phillies. And I try to always put it in perspective with the NFL. So if you lose one NFL game, just one, because of the way the schedule is, I try to explain that's like a 10-game losing streak in Major League Baseball, which is why it becomes such a serious thing. However, when we talk about the NFL season starting and we're looking at preseason, I'm just amazed at the coverage for these meaningless preseason games. I get it. Everyone wants content. But as we're heading toward the start of the regular season, what are you noticing about preseason? Has anything come across where your analysis of a team has changed because of a preseason game?
Yeah, I mean, there's legitimate quarterback competitions that are decided in the preseason. Yesterday, Indianapolis going with Daniel Jones over Anthony Richardson. We're waiting to hear what the Saints do. The Browns, really, that's more QB2, but that's going to be decided with Shador Sanders and Dylan Gabriel. I think for a lot of fan bases, a lot of the excitement stems from the fact that it's like their first chance to see young quarterbacks, rookies in particular, Jackson Dart, Cam Ward, all very exciting for those fan bases because even though Dart is not going to start week one, he's first round draft pick. If you're a Giants fan, like it's inevitably like it's exciting. You tend to not want to read too much into it because there's a lot of good examples throughout history of guys who have lit it up in preseason and then not gone on to do much. But I don't think fans are crazy. I think maybe you have to kind of parse it. Fans who are still like dialed in the fourth quarter when you're literally watching guys compete for special teams, that's a little bit, sicko behavior. But we see a lot of starters in the preseason. I mean, I was on a Sports Center on Monday with Rich Eisen after the Monday night game, and Joe Burrow played the entire first quarter. It was kind of shocking, but it's not all meaningless, is what I'm saying.
When I was thinking about what the Colts did a couple days ago, and as someone in New York, where I see the way Daniel Jones from day one, I'll never forget this. I mean, I finished the Montreal Marathon, and it was the day that he debuted. And as a Giants fan, everything felt good that day.
Yeah.
And then it went downhill like you're, a double X diamond in Colorado. And now all of a sudden he's starting. Well, is that more of an indictment on Richardson? Or is it more of a, wow, Daniel Jones may have finally figured this out?
It's definitely more about Richardson in my mind. It was a quarterback competition. I think Richardson did have the opportunity to run away with it. And he didn't, right? I don't think Daniel Jones like dramatically outplayed him in the preseason. They both played a decent amount in week two, but Richardson not seeing, he failed to identify pressure week one. He got hurt, just kind of added to the sense with him that there hasn't been the development on the mental side of playing the position. Also, in addition to kind of accuracy underneath that they would have hoped for with the, him being a first round pick. And, it's just he never got, there's kind of two ways to look at it. He never developed, but you could also say he didn't get the necessary reps, some of that because of injuries. Year one, getting hurt. He's, again, in this preseason game, getting hurt. I think for Colts fans, though, it's not a decision you feel good about because you wanted Richardson to win the job. And I'm not saying they should have given them the job, but with Daniel Jones, I think there's like a pretty clear ceiling on this offense. And, watching him in the preseason, he just looks the same to me. He's not going to push the ball downfield as much. He's athletic, but his accuracy isn't amazing, and he's going to take a lot of sacks. So, it's kind of like a lose-lose situation, I think, for the Colts franchise. I think what you might find interesting about this is, like, to me, I felt like the Colts front office and their head coach are, I think, correctly perceived as being on the hot seat. They went with the safer choice. And I think it's a good case study in like what can happen when the incentives of the decision makers maybe aren't aligned with what's best for the team. I'm not saying it was best for the team to start with Richardson, but they're not going to win a Super Bowl with Daniel Jones, right? So it felt like the safer option for the staff, but I don't know if it was the right choice for the franchise long term.
I actually thought it was strange when the coach not just doubled down, but to me, quadrupled down with the announcement by saying, this is not a temporary naming of a quarterback. I expect him to be our quarterback all season long, as though trying to eliminate anybody chirping when he goes 3 and out and then they score 4 points, 3 points, 4 points. That'd be funny. 2 safeties, the first game of the season. So that I don't see that often. What would explain? It's not their size of the contract, Mina, or their length that they have left. I think it's really them trying to, does it take pressure off Richardson, or do you think it adds pressure to Jones?
It takes pressure off Richardson insofar as, like, if he does come in at some point, and honestly, if I had to bet, I think we'll see him at some point this season. He's not going to have to be the savior. It will be at a point which the offense would have already been struggling and whatnot. But I don't think it's good for it. I've seen some people say it's good for Anthony Richardson. It's not good for Anthony. He needs to play football. I mean, the dude had barely played. He barely played as a prospect. It's a big part of the reason why he was like kind of overvalued. And he's barely played in the NFL. He spent an entire year sitting on the bench. He's not going to learn from sitting on the bench behind Daniel Jones. As far as like how definitive the staff was, I really think this was just them kind of protecting themselves and going with what they felt like, okay, we have a guy who can run our offense. Maybe it's not going to look pretty. Maybe we're not going to be, certainly not a top 10 unit, but at least it'll look functional. They had that drama last year where they benched Richardson. for Joe Flacco, who then he came in and he was bad, and they went out back to Richardson. I think they just want to avoid the yo-yoing, even though if Daniel Jones struggles, and he will at some point, fans are going to be calling for it.
Chris Ballard, their GM, I recall him saying, I love when GMs do this. I've got to be better at my job. That's what every GM and every coach and every team president says when your team's losing right before you get rid of all the players. But he's been saying this for 2 years. He's got to be better at his job. But this is an interesting year for the Colts. Jim Irsay passed away. You've got his 3 children running it, but different departments. There's one of the 3 is in charge. One, I think, is in PR. One's running the foundation. And Jim Irsay was definitely involved, as my view is all team owners in every sport are hugely involved. But I wonder if Chris Ballard said to himself this year, wow, it's more on me now because I have a really inexperienced owner.
I think he knows that regardless of ownership, his job is on the line just because of some of the mistakes that they've made in drafting and just the fact that they haven't solved the quarterback problem since Andrew Luck retired. If you look at the list of quarterback, and they've been also kind of like sort of too good or too mediocre rather. And then they had the chance to go after one, and they took the shot on Richardson, and that was Chris Ballard's choice, and obviously it didn't work out. So, yeah, he's going to be accountable for what happens this season. I think for the Colts, what is going to be interesting is if Daniel Jones drags them along to, say, 9-8, knocking on the door of the playoffs, maybe if it's 10-7, is that enough, right, for both the head coach and the GM to save their jobs? I think fans will probably be saying no, but that's going to be the difficult decision for the ownership.
Mina, you said something that I can't let go. You said that it's too late. The Richardson draft did not work out. Is that a fait accompli now because Jones got the job or Richardson's been hurt so much? Is that it for him?
I think it's it for him in Indianapolis. I don't think he's necessarily on track for like a Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith, Sam Darnold type revival. But there's a reason why those revivals happen, not just like on different teams, but on several teams removed, right? Trey Lance, I think, is probably the closest corollary because he was a draft pick of the Niners, gave up the world to go get, and then he struggled and he got beat out and he didn't play because he was injured. He was also incredibly inexperienced and he just needed to play. And he got some preseason reps in Dallas, didn't look good, played a little bit. This preseason in LA, he looks pretty solid at the Chargers. He's the backup there. I think he's going to win the QB2 job. So I think Anthony Richardson could have that kind of trajectory where he ends up being a backup and then he gets a chance later on down the road to actually improve his accuracy and decision-making and whatnot. But I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
Does this feel like a different year? This could be total recency bias for me, but does this feel like a different year in terms of all of the quarterbacks and how unsettled all these teams are with their quarterbacks? You mentioned the Giants. They have Russell Wilson. It's like everyone played musical quarterback chairs. And to keep track, you've got Aaron Rodgers, who's with the Steelers, obviously. So Russ Wilson said, all right, Steelers, Giants. And then Justin Fields said, all right, I can get a job. I'll go to the Jets. Is this, do I have it wrong, Mina? Is this every year or is this year a little different?
I think every year there's like a decent amount of quarterback movement, probably like a quarter of the league or so. This year, you have a couple of rookies, a couple of vets in new places. I think Geno switching teams was unexpected, and that sort of maybe added a little bit to the sense of momentum, but it's pretty normal, I would say, for this percentage of quarterbacks to be new around the league.
So let's try to narrow it down. If we're looking at Tua on the Dolphins, and we're looking at Trevor Lawrence on the Jaguars. And I give those examples because I saw recently a tier ranking of quarterbacks. And Tua and Trevor were like on the bottom, like top of tier 3 or middle of tier 3. And I was thinking about the contracts they have and the money that's being paid to them. So when you're looking at those two, let's start with those two. We'll go down to Florida. Who do you think has the best chance of leading their team to any sort of success this season?
Ooh. Those two are really good to comp because I think they're both two of the more difficult teams to like get your arms around in the NFL. I would say I slightly lean Miami because the Jags defense, I think they were the worst pass defense in football last year. And I just did an AFC South preview and there's just some really big holes on that defense. I mean, the Dolphins secondary has some issues as well, but the pass rush should be good. I'll
Isn't
go
every
Miami.
cornerback isn't every cornerback for the Dolphins out? Like, aren't you and I the starting
Yeah,
cornerbacks?
I know it's really bad. I don't know. Maybe Jacksonville. Jacksonville also gets to play in the AFC South. I think though, if I right now, I would say I'd probably Miami, but I wouldn't be surprised if both teams miss the playoffs.
So is this the final year for them?
Oh
If they
no,
don't make the playoffs, if Tua and Trevor,
no,
is this just another year?
nope.
They'll come back next year,
They'll
and
come back.
that's it. The
I
Dolphins
could
and
pull
Jaguars have
uh,
made their bed.
certainly not Trevor. I haven't looked at Tua's contract in a while, but I suspect it is not easy to get out of this year. Last time I looked, it was a little bit. It wasn't like super team friendly, but it wasn't like a devastating. All right, Tua. Let's see. 2027, they can get out with a $35 million cap hit. So it wouldn't be this year, it would be next year.
That's
This
so
year,
far from now.
this year's a $60 million cap hit if they were to call
I'm
it.
just wondering, the
Oh
way
no, more than
teams
that. Sorry, 99 million.
90, so he's there. I mean, it is what it is. If
Yeah.
he's hurt, he's hurt. If he's not good, he's not good.
There's a big drop off the next year though, yeah.
It seems to me like in baseball, what you try to do is have as many overperforming players as possible, which means as many young pitchers who are not yet arbitration eligible, who can start every 5 days
Yeah.
and give your team a chance to win. You sprinkle in a few veterans at the back of the rotation, maybe get someone at the back end of the bullpen. But in football, it seems to me that if you are giving all of your money, like 20% plus of your cap to a quarterback, and you can't surround him with enough that they win, you have basically crushed yourself for a period of years. And it's hard not to think that the Dolphins and Jaguars have done that.
I don't think the Dolphins' biggest issue is merely Tua. I mean, they kind of went all in a couple of years ago on a few players, and I think they're paying the price for that now as those players age, your Tyreek Hills and whatnot. Um, I generally object to the notion for a while, people were pushing the idea that you can't pay a quarterback and have success in the NFL, and it was skewed because Brady took like a little bit less. Patrick Mahomes was on his rookie contract at first, and they just consumed a large portion of. I mean, they just won so many Super Bowls, right, between them and appeared in so many. But I do think it's entirely possible you can pay a quarterback. You just can't make. I would say like three or four, maybe three big mistakes. Like if you're going to pay three giant contracts, two of the three have to be good players, and then yeah, depending on how your team is built, you have to draft reasonably well around them. The Chiefs are a good example. I think the Chiefs have stayed competitive. They have the best quarterback in football. They have brilliant coaches. And while they have not drafted really well on offense, defensively, they've been able to find a lot of contributors later in the rounds too. So it's just, you stay competitive, but you have to hit on a few draft picks and you can't waste too much of your money.
Where do you stand on players who are under contract choosing to hold out and not play or demand a trade? And I'm thinking of Hendrickson, but we
Yeah.
can go down to Parsons. We can go anywhere we want with that. I was brought up in baseball where you sign a contract, that's your contract. Like, just sometimes we're going to win, sometimes you're going to win. But if every time the player feels like we win, all of a sudden the player doesn't show up and play, I mean, I think our sport would implode. But in football, it seems to be happening a lot. Why is that?
Well, you know this. The difference is football player who's not making what he deserves could go out one day, break his leg, and never get what he deserves. It's very different from baseball, right? The personal risk that players assume on a week to be forget even not even I'm not even talking about games, David, like practice. They go to camp, a non-contact injury, it's over. You're never going to get paid. So I would say that's the single biggest there, differentiation. I mean, a lot of these players also like were on cost control deals for the first 5 years, let's be honest, of their careers, sometimes more if you're a first round draft pick and you have the 5th year option and then there's the tag and all of that. So football players are like pretty routinely not paid what they're worth if they're stars, almost always. As my issue with it is just the efficacy. It's just it doesn't usually work out. And that there's a million reasons for that. CBA, fines, all of that. But it's very, very hard for players to actually exert the leverage of a holdout and get rewarded for it.
Yet they're still doing it.
You know, there's a litany of reasons for that. I would say there are examples of it. You'd have to really like break down with the fines whether or not it's worth it or not. But I think for players, it's just a decision. Like the risk of me going out there and getting hurt right now is not worth it mentally.
I've always had a thought on this, which is there's a CBA and there's opportunities, and I've had all the arguments with everybody that management has the advantage in every CBA negotiation, not just in sports, but across the world of unions. If you have a choice, be on the management side, you're going to have the inherent advantage. But in football, there's opportunities. Now, we can talk about Pablo Torre finds out in the collusion grievance and the fact that it smelled, felt, and touched and sounded like collusion, but there wasn't enough proof and all of the stuff that goes on. But the players have an opportunity to choose what they want. And we know that what management wants is an 18th game. And so the opportunity with the trade that could happen in the CBA negotiation, which is what happens all the time, what is the number one thing that you think NFL players want? Is it as obvious as what everyone says? They just want the ability to have more guaranteed money?
Well, getting more guaranteed money isn't something you can negotiate for, right? Like that's a product of um
You can negotiate that certain players, rookie deals, second
oh,
deals.
sorry. Yeah. Well, rookie year deals, yeah, you could change the rookie contract scale and sure. But I'm just saying, like, when we talk about like these football players who sign these like mega contracts, quarterbacks are most notably ones. This always comes up. There's only been one fully guaranteed contract, truly, Deshaun Watson, right? Why don't other players do that? That's not a CBA issue. That's a personal risk issue. It's a CBA issue insofar as you get there because you've had your wages suppressed for, as I said, multiple years because of the rookie wage scale, the franchise tag, the fifth year option, all of that. So by the time you actually get a chance to get paid, are you really going to hold out? Also, the team has leverage over you because, again, you're going out there, you're risking your body every day. Do you want to wait to actually hit free agency, which is the other thing that it would probably take, correct, right? Like you want to get paid early. This is the good teams get extensions done early. They're taking advantage of the fact that if you're a player and you've only made X amount of money, you've been paid since you were, especially in the pre-NIL era, you've never been paid what you were worth. Why would you absorb the risk of playing another season for the possibility of more guarantees if an owner is telling you, I can give you $100 million now? But that's a personal issue. Like it would take a player who's willing to like push it to the limit. There's been some unusual examples of players who have come close to achieving free agency. Kirk Cousins is a good example and have gotten a lot more guaranteed money because of that. You asked me what players want. I mean, I think they just want more of the pie. A greater revenue share of the revenue is the most important thing.
Well, when you look at their CBA, though, that's the whole point of a salary cap is that there's pegged. And so as the revenue goes up, the players will continue, the salary cap will continue to go up. And God knows there's 20 people per team who are hired to get around the salary cap and figure out ways. It happens in the NBA, it happens in the NFL. So I think it's an interesting conversation because the revenue pie keeps growing. We know that the NFL will opt out of its current media deals. They're going to get a new set of media deals.
Yeah.
We just heard this week about the possibility of a Super Bowl in London, and people just poo-pooed it. And I am telling you, Mina, it's going to happen. I have no doubt in my mind there is way too much money at stake. Do you have any sort of thought? I know our time is short, but are you not happy with that possibility, or do you realize it's business?
Oh, I think that's way better proposition for everybody than regular season games overseas where the travel is just brutal because the Super Bowl, you have the time removed from season. Teams are spending extra time on location. So that to me makes more sense than, like we have the opener, there's a Brazil game week 1, that's much trickier from a logistics perspective and much harder on these players and their bodies than a Super Bowl. So I don't know.
Brazil's even harder, Mina, because you don't really switch time zones. It's not many time zones, and it's still 9 hours.
It's brutal. I think a Super Bowl overseas makes way more sense to go back to your proposition. Like just because logistics. I mean, I've always heard, not always heard, but like people have talked for a while about like, what if the NFL played a game in like Asia? And I just don't see how. It's just crazy. Like from a travel perspective, it's so hard on these guys. But Super Bowl, yeah, sure. You have time. You get to spend a week there. You get to get acclimated. et cetera, et cetera. That makes more sense to me.
So it's going to bust ESPN's travel budget when there's a Super Bowl
Hey,
in London
I'm
because
down.
you're
I'll go to
going.
London. Yeah, I'll go there for a week. Happy to.
Just remember when you're there, you have to look right. If you remember nothing else from our talk
Right.
today, when you're in London, make sure you look right. Because if you look
Okay.
left, there's going to be a double-decker bus and it's going to hit you in the back.
Be a horrible way to go, David. Just a
You
horrible way
are
to go.
welcome. Mina, thank you. Host, we're done. We're out of time already. I told you 25, 25. Host of Mina Kimes twice a week. Let's get the crossover. Let's do that connectivity,
I love it.
please. ESPN NFL analyst, the NFL season starting, and make sure you listen to Mina wherever she is because she's everywhere. Thank you, Mina.
Thanks for having me on.